maybe having 6 one-on-one. So that's good, that's good.
If this is your first word here, welcome. Welcome to Get Money Smart at Lindenwood, our annual series of financial education outreach to students, faculty, and staff here at Lindenwood and all around the community. If it's your first time, we'd love for you to take a little quiz. All right, and you should see a QR code and a link on your screen if you're online. If you've done it before, you don't have to repeat it. It's the same little kind of little survey. So don't worry about that. And welcome back if you've returning. So hopefully you were here last week and enjoyed that. And I think you're in for a treat today. So give you a little update on what's coming up. So next week, we're going to have a session on sustainable budgeting, and that is going to be led by Dr. Carolina Schneider and Dr. Kim Ulrich. And then we're going to wrap up the month with some investing basics with our very own Hannah Brandstetter, who's sitting in the room right now, and Greg Knight, two of our amazing finance students here. So be sure to tune in for those. Those are going to be really, I think, practical insights, all right, for really thinking about your finances. So just as a quick reminder, our Get Money Smart at Lindenwood is part of a greater initiative that's going on all around the whole St. Louis region that's called Money Smart Month St. Louis. There's a link you can hop on there and find out more about events going on all over the place. So I'm going to be at the St. Louis Zoo on Saturday morning, so come see me. We're going to be doing some outreach there. So I'd love to see people come out for that. Here's the link to the survey and the QR code if you couldn't see it from the first screen. So if you're new, definitely do that. And I think we're about up. So I'm going to introduce our speakers, and they're going to, we got a tag team today, which is going to be awesome, exploring the incredibly interesting world of cryptocurrency. It's something people hear lots of about. Many people don't know much about it, and you hear lots of conflicting things. And so I think today you're going to learn a little bit more truth about what's going on, thinking about how that may impact you and how it can be a part, perhaps, of your own financial situation, or should you avoid it? And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Jim Mosquera, the director. I started to say chair, and I'm like, no, that's not right. I'm like, there's too many titles floating around. So the director of the Duree Center for Entrepreneurship. So welcome, and I'll let you share whatever you'd like and turn it over to you.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and to everyone online as well. My name is Jim Mosquera. Hopefully the camera will track me. There it is. My name is Jim Mosquera. I am the director of the Duree Center for Entrepreneurship. I came to Lindenwood about the last day of November, so I haven't been here very long. But it's interesting, and I'm very happy that the Hammond Center invited me to contribute on this. My way of background, my background is actually in engineering. I don't have an academic background like most people here, so I actually worked in private industry in telecommunications and technology for many years. I've had a couple of my own companies, but where this sort of interfaces really well is I've written several books. I have a book series, a nonfiction book series on financial markets, the economy, and so forth. And for those that are more willing to be entertained, I have a political thriller series that integrates some of these same topics, along with journalism, cryptocurrency, politics, elections, and a bunch of other stuff, which is loosely based on what I saw, what was going to happen in the United States. And some of that stuff actually occurred already. But I think I bring a very unique perspective to the world of cryptocurrency, and because I have that background in technology and cryptocurrencies as they're defined today, and most of what I'm going to talk about today is relegated to Bitcoin. It's really money that was created for the internet. And that's why I think it's important to kind of define that up front. I think it's even more important to take what I'll call a historical walk. And by the way, for those that are in the audience, there is going to be audience participation today. So I'm going to ask you questions. So the people that are not allowed to answer are those with a PhD after their name. So they are not allowed to answer, but the rest of you are. So here's a historical walk. The things that you see on the screen right now actually represented money at one point in time. Seashells, coffee beans, and feathers. So here's the first audience participation question. what would be some of the challenges of having, let's say, coffee beans, feathers, or seashells serve as money? Not everyone. Yes, sir.
That they are getting, that you get them from, like, really hard to find ecosystem that can build those things.
Okay.
So, for you to produce or have the absolute advantage of them, you just have to have coffee beans, a beach, and then that type of animals in your.
Why would you want to have this instead of like coffee beans, seashells, feathers?
God, killing us now.
People are not going to be tempted to use it for other.
Okay, well, Hannah, riddle me this, and why does it have an established value? What makes it valuable?
Government that backs it or the asset itself. People agreeing upon it being a goose gold, being a scarce good that people want to exchange.
To make a gold coin, so let's think about what has to happen. So number one, you have to mine it, right? So have you guys ever seen these huge mines where they have, these big pieces of equipment, they dig up a lot of earth, so you have to separate it, clean it, melt it, and then create, molds for, it might fit in these types of coins. So if you think about, the effort that's required to create a gold coin, and when we're saying, Hannah said that it's a good representation of money, I want you to keep that in the back of your mind, is the effort that got required to make this money. Oh, there it is. Here's a kind of a prevailing theme I'm going to talk about a little bit in the time that I have, and that's the theme of wars are expensive. Another audience participation question: who pays for wars? Who pays for the cost of fighting a war? People. What people? So the people of the nation. So if you think back to the Revolutionary War, it was fought when, I don't know if you guys remember the history, you had all these people dressed up as Indians. They went to the Boston Harbor. They took a bunch of tea out of some ships and they threw them into the harbor. And I think some of that was complaining about tax. So if you're saying people paid for it, if General Washington now wants to fight the British, does he have to then go ask the people for money to help fight that? You're saying no. Anybody else? So what the Continental Congress did is they actually decided, we're going to print up these things that are called Continentals. And the Continentals had a value initially at the start of the war that was tied to what was called the Spanish milled dollar. And the Spanish milled dollar was actually something that was tied to gold. So it actually had a direct link to that. But one thing that's curious that happened was, as the war went on, and again, wars are expensive, you'll keep hearing me say that, they realized they needed to print more and more of these Continentals. So by the end of the war, the value of a Continental, which I don't have a picture of right now, was about 1/100th the value it was at the beginning of the war. Okay. Why is that? Because what did it take to produce a Continental? Continental is just a piece of paper. So you could put whatever value you wanted on it. So think about that for a second. Slide before, we talked about the effort that's required to mint gold, gold coin or whatever. And think about the effort that was required just to print a piece of paper. Wars are expensive. I don't know if I said that earlier. This is World War II. Much more to think about from a cost perspective, right? Because now you got to build planes, troop carriers, jeeps. So it's a lot more expensive to do that. Very important slide here. If you remember anything from this presentation that I'm going to talk about today, remember this slide. This is a hotel in a place called Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. So 1944, I didn't say 1945. 1945 was when World War II ended. Remember, wars are expensive. So all of the Allied nations got together in this hotel in July of 1944, and they said, hey, you know what? We had this problem where, you know, the Third Reich was created, and it was perhaps a reaction to war reparations from World War I. The financial system of the world is all messed up. We need something new. So these countries got together, about 700 delegates in New Hampshire in July of 1944. Again, that's before the war ended. And they said, by the way, they met in this room here, all those chairs were made of gold. Okay. So why do I keep talking about gold with respect to this conference? So what they decided was, they said, okay, we're going to have a fixed exchange rate. So we're going to, if you're one country, you're going to have this many of your units of currency are going to be exchanged for this many dollar units. Okay. So that was called a fixed exchange rate for everything that was set up across the world. So you're probably thinking, well, what's the big deal about that? Because can't people monkey around with their own money, right? Like I remember I said before with the Continentals, they would just print more of them, right? Well, what they decided was something very, very good. They said, okay, a US dollar, if you have a US dollar in your hand, it's going to be the same thing as holding 1/42 of an ounce of gold. So if you produced 42 of these dollars, that's equivalent to an ounce of gold. So what that did was it told the world that the US dollar represented something. Remember I said gold, the effort it's required to produce some of those gold coins. So what happens then is all the countries of the world agreed on this exchange standard, okay? And they would need to hold dollars in order to conduct their trade. So it put the dollar in a king position until, oh, by the way, I don't know if I said wars are expensive. Korean War, the 1950s, Vietnam War, 1960s and 70s. And then I put a picture of Lyndon Johnson there because in the 1960s, there was something called the Great Society programs, right, which cost money. So for all of these things that are going on up here, another audience participation question, who paid for the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the Great Society programs? Who paid for all that? Anyone? Bueller?
Yeah.
Debt. Anyone else? So no one went around, the presidents of the United States at the time, they didn't go around and say, hey, you know what, we're fighting this war in Korea, we're fighting this war in Vietnam, we've got this Great Society programs. I'm going to come to every household and I'm going to ask you for extra money to pay for all this. Did that happen? No. Now, here's something that does happen where people do have to pay for something. Real quick side note. Last month, I was in my homeowners association meeting, and the homeowners association said, hey, we've got this extra work we need to have done here. On top of your normal assessment, yearly assessment, we're going to charge you another $100 because work needs to be done. Okay, so imagine if the president of the United States or the Congress had gone to everyone in the United States and said, I'm going to put my hand out. I need for you to give me money to fight all this. It didn't happen. So instead, it was, as the gentleman said, debt. In 1971, this guy said, this exchange mechanism that we have right now, excuse me, between all of the countries where we said gold is equivalent to X number of dollars, we're temporarily suspending that. Now, there's nothing ever so permanent as a temporary government program. So when that happened, all of the currencies of the world then started floating relative to one another, okay? Now, why is that important is because now there's no link, there's no hard link that establishes the dollar to anything at that point. In 2008, probably most of the people in this room were probably in grade school, maybe even before that. And so we had a financial crisis. Now, in innovation communities like I'm a part of, when there's an innovation that's required, normally it's there to solve a problem, okay? Nothing happens in innovation unless there's a problem to be solved, a job to be done. So again, another audience participation question. What problem would you say existed with money, given everything I've told you at this point, up until 2008? What problems would you say existed? You can't answer.
Print
I'm sorry?
it. People print it.
People what? Print it?
Yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
Like a country could just print more or create a policy in order to, like, I don't know how to explain it, but like, to print more in order to pay for debt, and that will just create inflation.
Okay, it's a good answer. So countries can create more of this money, and we don't have time to get into all the mechanics as to how that happens, but that's correct. So there's someone by the pseudonym of Satoshi Nakamoto in 2008 that said, there's a problem, and I'm going to innovate my way out of this. Let's skip through this next slide. Tawni's going to go through this a little bit more to talk about what specifically is money. And I know she has these same definitions, except for the last one, and it's called fungibility. And fungibility is important for money, which is basically $1 is exchangeable for another dollar. So, Hannah, if I give you $1 out of my pocket and you give me $1 back, right? $1 just looks like any other. $5 looks like $5. If I gave you 5 ones and you gave me $5 back, right? That's fungible. Okay. Now, in the crypto world, you may have heard something that is called a non-fungible token, NFT. So that means something else, which means it's not exchangeable. So this is really what, these are the definitions of money. So here's the next audience participation question. And why do those green pieces of paper have value? Yes, Hannah.
The government says so.
The government says so. Anyone else? So Hannah's partially right, because when you look at a dollar, well, I think that's, but when you look at a dollar and what the definition of a dollar is, look back historically at one point in time, and in my books, I have a picture of a dollar from the 1950s and what it means. And then you have these things introduced that are called Federal Reserve notes. Again, we don't have time to get into what Federal Reserve note is, but essentially a Federal Reserve note is an IOU. It's debt, okay? Now, the gentleman in the back said, a problem with our money today, why we would need to innovate our way out of this is because countries can just create a lot of it. And in the case of the United States was in a very unique position. And we know that because I told you in 1944, there was this international agreement that got established. And by virtue of that international agreement, it said countries need to hold dollars in order to conduct international transactions. Okay, there's another reason to hold dollars, which has to do with reserves and being a reserve currency. But again, a little bit beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about. So these dollars, basically today as they exist, they are considered legal tender for all debts, public and private. Okay, if you look at a dollar, a current dollar, you just pull one out of your wallet and look at what it says. And if I could pull out a dollar from 50 years ago or more, you'll see some very different definitions of that. Okay. And that's important to understand because the very definition of what we consider money has changed quite a bit. So I did a whole presentation at the Missouri Athletic Club a couple of years ago, almost to the day, where I talked about the future of money is digital. So you might say, well, Jim, isn't money digital already? Right? I mean, everybody has used PayPal before, Zelle, Cash App, etc. Well, what I will tell you is that money today, as you know it, is really not digital money. It's digital representations of physical money. And why is that? If you look today, our money basically sits in what's called a central accounting system. So what's a central accounting system? Central accounting system would be like what your bank has. So I have some money at Bank of America. Hannah may have money at Bank of America, Grant, Tawni, and Matt as well. And that accounting system basically keeps track of everything, right? But that accounting system exists in one place. It exists within Bank of America's sphere. Now, yes, they'll have a data center and they'll back that up and so forth, but that's where it exists. So the difference between digital money and the digital representations of money is digital money only exists digitally. It cannot be in physical form. So what I've said is you're going to have a decentralized future. And you can be a bank. You're probably wondering how it's possible. The basis of a lot of what you see, and I've said we're going to talk mostly about cryptocurrencies that are Bitcoin related, is that we have to be able to establish trust. So these cryptocurrencies don't work, Bitcoin doesn't work, unless you can establish these three things. So the first is, how do we know that users have value in their balances? So in cryptocurrency terms, that's considered a digital wallet. So before Hannah and I conduct a transaction, I have to understand, I have to know and verify that she actually has what she says she has. And then if Hannah's going to send me some value of Bitcoin, I have to know that she authorized that transaction. And the third thing is we have to make sure, and this is one of the biggest developments with Bitcoin and true digital money is that we eliminated the double spend problem. So what happens what happens if I have a copy of an MP3 on my computer? Can I send that to Hannah? Or can I send that to Grant? The answer is yes, right? I can send digital copies of anything. You don't want that with your money, right? You don't want to be able to create multiple copies of the same money, right? That won't work because then, you will have a double spend problem. So what I'll postulate today, and this will be the last thing I'll say, and then I'll stop and let Tawni go, and then we'll open it up for questions after she gets done, is that Bitcoin as it exists as money is a medium of exchange. People can freely exchange it. It's a unit of account. A Bitcoin is divisible into 100 million units, okay? And then each one of those units is called a Satoshi, is divisible into 1,000 units. So think about the smallest increment of Bitcoin that can exist. Is it a store of wealth? That's a subject of debate, okay? Let me come back to that in just a second. Is it fungible? Yes, because one Bitcoin is just like every other. Like the example that I gave earlier, if Hannah gave me $1 and I gave her $1 back, $1 is $1 is $1. Well, a Bitcoin is a Bitcoin is a Bitcoin. There is no distinction between them, okay? Now, is it a store of wealth? And this will be the last thing I'll say before I turn it over to Tawni. How does a Bitcoin come into existence? A Bitcoin comes into existence because it's mined. Remember the thing I said about gold? It gets mined, physically mined. This gets digitally mined, electronically mined. And I won't go into all the particulars for that. But in order to mine Bitcoin, it takes a lot of effort. It takes energy. It takes a lot of energy. It takes computing power, okay? And it's all working within an algorithm. So when you think about will this Bitcoin satisfy these definitions of money that I mentioned earlier, it does satisfy all those definitions. Now, how do dollars get created today for the most part? Does anybody know the answer? Again, the PhDs can't answer. Most dollars today are created by the commercial banking system, okay? So when loans are made, that is a dollar created. On the Federal Reserve side, when I think you said something about debt, when debt gets created by the Federal Reserve System, when debt gets created by the US government and then gets bought by the Federal Reserve System, the Federal Reserve doesn't have a pot of money there to use to buy that. That gets created. In all of those instances, how hard was it? How much effort did it require to create that money? Almost nothing, right? It's digital. I pressed a button. All of a sudden, I just bought 100 million of Treasury securities. So that is the big difference. If to take something away is to create Bitcoin requires effort. To create those gold coins that I mentioned earlier requires effort, okay? To create a lot of the dollars and what we have in our system today does not require a lot of effort. So think about that from an exchange perspective. If I have the ability to create monetary units that are used to exchange goods and services, right? And I can do that like that, as opposed to this, which requires a lot of effort to do. So anyway, with that, I will turn it over to Tawni, and then she'll go for a little bit, and then we'll do some Q&A afterwards.
Thank you. I may not be able to use the clicker with Pear Deck, but I'm going to invite everyone to go to joinpd.com, joinpd.com, use your phones, use your computers, because I too am very interactive. And I'd like for you to participate. The join code is GHAAHE. And the friends who are joining us online, you'll get that information in the chat box in just a moment. So again, it's joinpd.com. And we have G for green, H for highlighters, A for always, A for award, H for hilarious, and E for elephants. I love these different codes that they give you. So I'm going to go ahead and start. And for all of you who are sitting out there, I have a question to ask of you. You earn $1,000. Which are you going to choose? Are you going to choose to accept $1,000 in Bitcoin and hold it for 3 months? Or are you going to accept $1,000 and place it in a savings account for 3 months? Okay, make one of the two choices. And I know that we have at least 6, 7, 8 people in this room. People who are online, especially my students, you need to participate. Joinpd.com. And the join code is right up here in the upper right-hand corner. Okay, so let's see where we are. I can. Awesome. This is awesome. Awesome. Okay, so now do me a favor, explain your choice. And you just quickly, I'm not looking for a dissertation, just explain why you made the decision that you did. When you have two choices, you can get $1,000, exchange it, get Bitcoin, or you can put $1,000 in a savings account for 3 months. You're holding it for 3 months, regardless of what you do. So go ahead and write your responses if you would, please. Let's see what some of you are saying. Don't know what Bitcoin will be worth in 3 months. So I guess you're putting yours in the savings. Don't know enough about Bitcoin or what the objections are. Stability. I'm assuming that that's the problem with Bitcoin, but the savings account is considered stable. Current moment, I don't have much confidence in Bitcoin. Less risk for the savings account. These are the reasons why Bitcoin is not money. So this is a great example of how we have a point and we have a counterpoint. And as people in our academia, we like to go back and forth. We like to consider various alternatives. And in a modern society, there are 3 functions in which stable money, fills. 1 is a medium of exchange, 2 is a store of value, and 3 is a unit of account. And it's not enough to just be able to serve these functions in a limited capacity, but it's extremely important that people in the general population accept whatever is being used as money, and it's widely used as money, and it's backed by some type of system that guarantees the trust. Okay, you have that trust factor, that you understand that you have some faith and confidence that if you put $1,000 into an account, that $1,000 with some confidence will have the same value in 3 months, and you can turn around and use it as a medium of exchange to buy the goods and services that you want, or to secure the resources that you need, or you can get an idea of what other items are worth, And then when we look at the stored value, again, you want confidence that the money that you're holding will be worth something in the future, and you have a clear idea of what that value will mean. I'm not going to go through this. We have mostly econ students and finance people and business people in our session here, and I believe many of you are econ people online. But the bottom line, when we look at a growing society in which capital investments, whether they're human or physical, is an important part, where we're willing to take risks without certainty of payoff, we need something to serve in these 3 capacities as a medium of exchange, a unit of account, and store of value. Why is that? Because we want to be able to turn and be innovative. We want to diffuse new technologies. We want to be able to, experiment, but we also understand that along with experimentation is that we have failure. And when we fail, we don't want to be in extreme poverty, because when you're in extreme poverty, what that often means is you can't feed yourself, your families, you can't provide food or clothing or shelter, and the list goes on. So if we have money performing these 3 functions, and we have investment that's coming along the way, individuals like you and I, we can turn to do what it is that we do best. Operate on the basis of comparative advantage. We can specialize in markets, get better at what we do. We can create these surpluses that can be turned around in exchange for goods and services, but we don't have to rely on a barter system. We don't have to rely on a crypto currency system. We can use something that we have faith in, and that's what we call the US dollar and some other currencies in modern societies. So all of this is what leads us to growth in production and employment, so that we can do what it is that we do now, but in the future, we can do things even better, and we can innovate, we can create things that are not imaginable today. But in order to do that, we have to bring failure into our lives. And how we can do that is we provide ourselves with that cushion, and we primarily do that through our savings in sound investments. And if you're a risk-loving individual, then you'll find yourself entering some of these other areas that involve things like these speculative assets at best, which we call cryptocurrency right now. And we're using that term in a very, very general, broad sense. So when we look at sound money, and we think about it, we were all just starstruck with cryptocurrency. Many of us are. Even PayPal started accepting it in June. I believe it was June 16th of 2022. However, there's a catch. PayPal will allow you to buy cryptocurrency. However, it will not accept it as payment. For some of the reasons that all of you stated when I asked you the question in the very beginning. You don't know what the value is going to be in 3 months or 6 months. It's very volatile. You don't know how to interpret it. Is it a medium of exchange? What are you going to do with the cryptocurrency if you have it in your digital wallet? You really don't know what it is that you're going to be able to do with it. So when you go through, and if you answer this question, and I bet if you do, how many of you would be willing to buy it and then turn around and use it to buy goods and services? Usually what I find out is that most of you will say no. And the more people we have, I've had up to 300 people on the slide, most overwhelming majority of them will say no. I'm not gonna use it. So bottom line is cryptocurrency is not what we mean by sound money. At this stage in the innovative process, it's not something that can serve widely as that store of value, medium of exchange, in unit of account. However, it has some interesting attributes and people are experimenting with it. Does anybody know who this gentleman is? Football player? Okay, you're like, okay. He decided in November of 2021 that he'd accept $750,000 in pay, but he was going to be a leader, mover and a shaker. He accepted it in Bitcoin payment. It was the equivalent of $750,000. You sit there and you scratch your head and you think, what the heck? What is he thinking? Well, what happened is they accepted $750,000. You know how many Bitcoin that was worth at that time? Just honestly say, you have no idea. That's why this is not a medium of exchange right now. Nobody knows. You have to get online. You have to go back and you have to look at it. But he was forward thinking. He accepted it. So what do you think? How many Bitcoins was that 750,000 worth in November of 2021? Just take a wild guess. See what you're all thinking. Come on. So usually what I get is B and C. And those of you who have your computers open, the answer actually is 11. And what are you going to do with 11 Bitcoin? Just think about that. Scratch your heads. Well, one of the first things he had to do was pay taxes. Yes. And he accepted the Bitcoin first. It was part of his payment, but he had to pay taxes. And you think the California government or the federal government taxed his Bitcoin? They taxed his 750,000. Yes. So what he ended up having to do is he ended up taking the 11 Bitcoin and he had to cash it out. There's a problem. What was that problem? You saw it in the previous slide. We're short on time, so I'm not going through them quite as. What happened to the value of Bitcoin between November and January? Did it appreciate? It appreciated. Exactly, by 55%. So he was in what we call a pickle because he had to pay taxes on the 750,000, which came out to about $378,000. He had 11 Bitcoin at the time, and then when he went to cash them in, they depreciated by so much. They were like $65,000 before November. By January, it had fallen to about $36,000. So his net pay on this contract was equivalent to $64,000 US dollars. It's a big hit, my friends. It's a huge hit. But life goes on and people continue to experiment and we go on. And the great thing about the diffusion of technology is there is something that's happening with Bitcoin cryptocurrencies, but it's not actually the cryptos that I find the most interesting. It's the technology that backs them, and that's that blockchain technology. But the bottom line for us is that the masses, the general population, if we're in a position where we engage in prudent savings and then we move into this diversified investment and we allow the risk loving people to go out and do their things and invest in some of the crazy things that we're talking about, the cryptocurrencies and such, we still can get a growth and prosperity. And we should be interested in the cryptocurrency and the blockchain technology, but we always want to have a solid foundation. And that foundation includes being able to cover the basics in terms of food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, and such, and putting aside funds for what we call these like Las Vegas types of investments, because we don't know where they're going to end or where they're going to land us. So as I stated previously, the interesting part of cryptocurrency is not really the fact that we have this digital currency that allows a few people to use it for a medium of exchange and as a unit of account and as a store of value, but we have a lot of people who are eventually turning their attention to this type of technology. And we do see businesses, especially in troubled areas, in third world countries and those that don't have a lot of economic freedom, that they're using more cryptocurrency because it doesn't require government backing. So the cryptocurrency, as was previously stated, allows us to engage in this peer-to-peer transaction, and it doesn't require the government in order to do it, which is the power in the punch with the cryptocurrency. Unlike our central banking system, where you have entities who've given the power and authority to create money and to artificially increase or decrease interest rates, in the crypto system backed by this blockchain technology, it's peers who determine what other peers are going to do. And you have to have at least two agree to engage in a transaction for something to transpire. As was stated earlier, the Great Recession of 2008 was a pivoting moment in the crypto markets, because when you go in and you dig deep into the research and you look at the role of central banks, especially in the United States, we see that the central bank was creating excessively all of this money that was leading to artificially low interest rates. And some individuals responded to that incentive and they purchased homes that they couldn't afford. We see interesting things happening in the financial sector with these credit default swaps starting to emerge. It was the private sector's way to guard against a system-wide collapse in the housing market. And as this was taking place, we see some interesting things happening in the crypto market, and that's for another presentation in and of itself. But we see these competitive cryptocurrencies emerging, and more people who are coming about to use them, especially the interesting uses in those third world countries where individuals do not have what we call a stable money system and possibly corrupt markets. If you're interested in learning more about cryptocurrency in that area, I have 3 different references here, and you can go in and take a deep dive, and it really is a palatable way to learn more about cryptocurrency and the relationship with cryptocurrency, its emergence, and some of the interesting things that are going on with monetary policy in modern societies. A little pushback on what my friend here said about trust. In the crypto markets, you don't need trust. The trust that we know, as Fukuyama had described it, where people have to trust what's happening, or you have to have a third-party enforcement mechanism ensuring that if a contract is reneged on, that there's a third-party system or judicial system that can act on whatever has happened. In the crypto market with the blockchain technologies, as you said, there are these miners who are constantly striving to find the problems in the system. From start to finish, everything is traced in the cryptocurrency market. From the moment that something is created to the minute that it dies, you know exactly where it has been, where it's going, and it's constantly tracked and traced. And these miners, they don't get paid unless they find a problem in the system. So their incentive is to ferret out those less than honorable transactions, and everything has to be authenticated and it has to be auditable. That is not the case in modern societies in central banks. We don't know when a dollar bill is created, how it was created, and how to trace it, especially if it's done with expansionary monetary policy or contractionary monetary policy. We have monetary authorities sitting at keyboards just typing away and creating and taking out these systems, which is an interesting thing. So we get back to why modern society has this fiat money and we accept it. Well, it's because businesses accept it for payment. Individuals like you and I go to these businesses, we patronize and we patronize.
We're patrons.
We're patrons. We say it, what is it? It's
We
not
are patrons.
We're patrons, but it's not patrons.
You said patronize.
I know I did say that, but that's not what I want to use. But anyway, we are patrons of these businesses and we use money, not the special relationship we have with these businesses, because we know that we can do business in these impersonal environments. When we looked at the crypto market, I started presenting on this in 2018. This number, the list of businesses that are accepting cryptocurrency for payment has increased, but it has been at a very, very slow rate. In fact, I was in, Vancouver, Canada, when the first crypto machine was put into functioning order then. And they traced through the Fraser Institute the number of crypto machines since then. And it's grown, but it's grown at a very slow rate. So bottom line, when we look at cryptocurrency, we know what it is. It is a decentralized entity, a part of a system. It's not fiat money. It's money because the people who are using it say that it's money. They find it transparent. They find that it can be authenticated and it can be recorded. We know from start to finish what happens, and you don't have to know the other person. You're given that unique identifier. So it's not about persons and personalities. It's one of the most inclusive, diversified systems in the world and to date that we can have for transacting. Unlike fiat money, the money that government says is money, especially the US dollar is in the United States, we have no government that simply sits and blesses it. That's an upside and it's a downside, because if the system fails, we don't have FDIC and the insurances that the Federal Depository Insurance Corporation provides. And the crypto market is a network that is supported by the users. And if the users get upset with the system and they don't like it, they really do have the freedom to exit. By contrast, when you look at our fiat money system, that's not the case. So let's circle back to where we started in the beginning, and most of you already made this statement, is if you had $1,000, would you place that money in a savings account or would you purchase cryptocurrency? I feel fairly confident that you would say the $1,000 placing it in the savings account. So the bottom line is Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are speculative assets at best at this point in history. That will likely change over time, especially with the blockchain technology that backs it, because some interesting things are happening with that blockchain technology. They include advancements in healthcare, where unique identifiers are given to patients so you can keep your health record with you from start to finish. They are solving supply chain problems in agriculture in very interesting ways. So there's a lot of interesting things that are going on. And plus, they are not subject to the short-sightedness effects of government or the political influences of special interests. So the use of block technology is an advancement in technology that has very promising, advantages for us. But even the athletes, we get right back to them. You remember Jim was talking about the fungible versus the non-fungible. We even have our friend Adele, who's gone into the non-fungible tokens, and he's created a unique token in his name, and he can buy and sell them. And what's nice about this, especially those who have creative licenses, unlike the music industry and some of the other artistic industries, you have a unique identifier that cannot be replicated or duplicated by others. And so it's an interesting market and done some very interesting things. But again, it's about supply and demand. You can create all of these NTFs that you want, but it takes someone to demand it. And what's interesting, if you go through these, this history, you'll see that Odell has wanted some really high prices for his NTFs. Bottom line is you can only sell them for what people are willing to pay. And you'll see that when demand is not present, then he lowers the price. So it's a great exercise in supply and demand. So as an educator, I call all of you to learn more about this, because I think through cryptocurrency and blockchain technology, we can really understand more about modern money and the role that it has played in our lives, because it is with modern money, having something serve as that unit of account, that medium of exchange, and that store of value that has allowed us to go about our business and specialize in whatever it is that we do at our comparative advantage. And we can do it bigger, better, and faster. And therefore, we're willing to accept income in US dollars as payment for what it is that we do, and we do very well. We turn around, we buy goods and services because we trust that US dollar and that other people understand what the value of that dollar is. Cryptocurrency is simply not there yet. Will it be there in the future? Who knows? The bottom line is it's fun to experiment, and I have done so with my nieces and my nephews and my son. One Christmas in 2017, I asked them if they wanted $250 in cash or if they wanted $217 in some type of cryptocurrency. With the exception of my nephew, they took the cryptocurrency. With the exception of my nephew, nobody else has any money left. But my nephew has a Yeti cooler, and that's what he purchases $250. So my portfolio, I have kept simply because it's grown in value, and I've gotten a couple of publications out of it, describing my journey and explaining the differences between modern money and cryptocurrencies. And so if you're interested in talking more about it, I would love to chat with you. And as we end, when you are in a position where you can have this money and you are given choices, buy cryptocurrency or Bitcoin, buy an NFT, save it for a rainy day, or place it in emergency funds, or even invest in an index fund. Hopefully you understand that options 3 and 4 are the most prudent of the 4 options that are given. And so I have references to everything that I do. Again, feel free to stop by my office. I'm in Harmon Hall 159, and I'm going to bat this over to Jim, and we'll accept any questions if there are, because we have 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have 10 minutes for questions.
Yeah, let's open it up for questions, and people online, if you've got questions, feel free to type those in the chat, and we'll have somebody monitoring those. Anybody quickly here have a question? Well, I'm going to throw out one, or go ahead.
Just with some talk in the news recently with centralized digital currency, I was just curious what your all's thought.
Central bank digital currencies?
Yes.
Okay.
Because there was some news, of course, it's kind of been disproven because of Fed now, it's not exactly a cryptocurrency that they're trying to establish in the upcoming summer, but if there were to be steps taken towards that path, what do you see that looking like?
Oh, I mean, it's the technology that I think is interesting. It's going to be interesting to see if the central banks want to use the technology, because again, they're held responsible from start to finish to keeping track of when that currency comes into existence and where it goes along the way. And the Fed, just looking at the rules and regulations that guide it right now, they are very closed door, because they can make a move and that has rippling effects throughout the US economy and also around the world. So I don't know. It's an interesting thing to think about, but you've only got a few countries that have entered this market, and I think for good reason. It's new. How are you going to keep track of, what it is that you're issuing, and how are people going to be able to make sound decisions based on something that's so volatile?
Yeah, CBDC is interesting. 2 years ago, as I mentioned, I gave a talk at the Missouri Athletic Club, and it was called The Future of Money. And at the very, very end of the presentation, I 2 slides on central bank digital currencies, and I made a prediction. So this would have been in May of 2021. I said, you're going to hear more about this, and you're going to hear about it a lot in January of 2022. And what happened in January 2022? February, that's when the Beijing Winter Olympics happened, if you remember that. And I said, you're going to see that introduced at the Beijing Winter Olympics. So what are CBDCs? CBDCs to me are the best affirmation that cryptocurrency is real, okay? Because the governments of the world, now China's, and I'll give you some of the more nefarious reasons for doing it. Government of China has adopted that right now. The first CBDC was actually adopted by the Bahamas. It's called the Sand Dollar, right? Sand Bahamas. But what are CBDCs? They're basically units of currency that are issued by a central bank. And they do live digitally, but unlike cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, instead of there being, remember I said earlier about the centralized ledger and everything's in one place, Bitcoin, the beauty about Bitcoin is, and here's another audience participation question, who runs the internet? Anybody? Like seriously, who runs the internet? Who has authority to run the internet? And anybody can answer that, even the PhDs.
The users.
The answer is no one. No one runs the internet. How does the internet run itself? Okay. So I come from a background in technology, right? So the internet runs itself because a number of people agreed on a set of rules on how to connect networks together. So that's the internet. The internet is a bunch of networks connected together. Okay. This campus here is part of the internet, but no one controls that. Okay. Now imagine instead with a CBDC that you're actually under the control of a central bank that's issuing these units of currency. But instead of it being, like Bitcoin, the ledgers are everywhere. So if you blow up my house, let's say I was running a Bitcoin node, does that mean the end of the Bitcoin network? No, you'd have to blow up everything, right? So that's the difference between centralized and decentralized. And that's another important point to take away from today's discussion is that central bank digital currencies are not decentralized, they're centralized. So what does that mean? If you have a central bank that's issuing digital currency, you are basically in a financial corral, okay? You are in a financial corral. The privacy that you would have that's equivalent to cash or some of these cryptocurrencies is completely gone. In China, okay, that's the reason I brought up China earlier. In China, they are using it, they have used it as what's called a social credit system. Now, what does that mean? So let's say that you do something that is politically unpopular in the government of China, all right? And let's say also that your money is in this financial corral and it's controlled by central authority. And somebody says, oh, Hannah, you wrote something very, very, very bad against the Chinese Communist Party. We're going to penalize you. So maybe you don't have access to your funds now, okay? Maybe the other thing that can happen with central bank control of a currency is they'll say, when you get paid on the 15th of the month, you have to spend all of that by the 30th of the month. If you don't spend it, you lost it, okay? That's the difference between something that's centralized and decentralized. So if there's a message to take away from centralized, central bank digital currency, it's centralization versus decentralization.
Good response. Thank you.
Sorry.
If we use cryptocurrency in the future, the transaction fee are getting lower, right? Because we don't have to go to bank, and that happened. There are so many cryptocurrency, so many kinds of cryptocurrency will be happen and used among people in the future. And
so the question is, will I see more cryptocurrencies used in the future, like all different kinds or something?
yeah,
Yeah, so that's the question is for those that are online, he asks, will more cryptocurrencies be used in the future? One of the things, and again, this will get a little bit esoteric, we don't really have time to develop, is there's a lot of things that exist out there that are cryptocurrencies. There are other things that are blockchain, there are tokens that exist on blockchains, and they serve different purposes. But right now, Bitcoin has been the most widely adopted as currency, if you will, as money. The government of El Salvador last year declared that Bitcoin could be legal tender. Okay. What is legal tender? That means it can be used there for all debts, public and private, like in the United States. So in the future, and this is, by the way, this is a great opportunity for innovation. So I'm part of the innovation community of the university. Is if you want to be very, very innovative with cryptocurrencies right now, create interfaces for people to make it easier to use. I've been in the space since 2012. Okay, that's when I first had my first Bitcoin. All right, I can tell you that it is still difficult to do things in the crypto world. It is. It's not like necessarily like pulling out your phone and doing things on Cash App. It's getting better, but it's not there yet. So in the future, yes, you will see much more of that adopted. And from a political perspective, I mentioned earlier that, this big agreement that happened in 1945 called the Bretton Woods Agreement, and that the United States was in this preeminent position in the world. So the United States, uses that as a geopolitical hammer with other nations. Okay. If you keep getting hit on the head, right, by a country that says, do this, or we'll exclude you from, banking, right? We'll kick you out of the SWIFT system. What do other countries do in response? Do they want to keep getting hit over the head? No. They want to start doing some different things now. And so that's why you're seeing now countries across the world disintermediating the dollar, saying, I don't need dollars anymore for country A to trade with country B. They'll say, we'll just trade with our own, right? Some of them are actually creating cryptos to do that as well. So that's another really, really important point, is that, we've had this power, we've had this unique privilege, this leverage, but now it's coming back to haunt us.
That's only if it serves as widely used as a medium of exchange, a unit of account and store of value, and it's very, very far away from that right now. And it's great to experiment, but we had the wild, wild west with our own currencies. And when you go back and you pull back the layers of the onion and you look at the history behind the US dollar, you'll see that states had their own currencies at one point. It's an interesting history. So what's happening now, you're living through historical moments. And I do think that it's going to be an interesting time for all of you. And I have most enthusiasm for that blockchain technology.
I'm going to ask one question. I don't know if this will be the last one or not, but cryptocurrencies have really been pushed as this amazing investment tool. I think particularly with younger generations, minorities, this has looked like an easy entry for kind of the common person who doesn't really understand investment, which that's why you need to tune in for the last session of the month. Like it's somehow something easy and the place to kind of like write the magic touch, and you're going to make a fortune for this sort of easy access. I mean, how would you guys respond? Because I mean, TV's full of commercials about it. Social media's full of, ads about it. This is something, the common people are kind of just seeing and getting exposed to. I mean, we've kind of focused on sort of its role as a money. I mean, how would you see it as sort of these investment opportunities for people? What is your kind of takeaway?
Well, here's what I would tell you. I think it's wrong to think about Bitcoin as this is a get-rich-quick scheme. Okay, I really do, because if it's truly to serve its function, it needs to serve its function as money. Okay, and we don't necessarily acquire money to make money, right? It's like if I hold $1, it's like, okay, well, a year from now it's going to be worth more. More than likely, it's going to be worth less, due to inflationary issues, right? But there are some countries where it makes sense to hold something like that. Okay, if I'm in Venezuela and I'm fleeing the Maduro government because I want to go across to Colombia, does it make sense for me to have even US dollars in my hand? Or does it make more sense for me to have crypto in a digital wallet, right? Whereas if I'm going across the border, a guard can say, well, here, give me the dollars that you have and I'll let you go across. So so for some people, crypto is an absolute lifeline. It's not an investment for them, but it's an absolute lifeline. I think there's a culture, Grant, that's been created, and this is part of what I'll call the everything bubble. I came up with the term, if you can look it up on the internet, it's called omni bubble, and you'll see it traced to like tags that I put out there. And I'd call it the everything bubble, right? Which means that there's this speculative mania that has just come across, many sorts of investments, including crypto. Okay. And when Tawni earlier talked about the NFTs and Odell Beckham's NFTs and the Bored Apes and the crypto punks that she had on there earlier, you saw the prices, dollar prices of some of these things just go crazy. And I was like, that doesn't make sense, right? So yes, I do think that's part of the overall culture of that as well. Now, the real key is if we have this discussion 10 years from now, would you rather have held Bitcoin or would you rather have held US dollars, right? If you're looking at what I call liquidity preferences, where do you want to hold your money? If I'm in a third world country, maybe it's much better for me to hold things in crypto than it is my native currency. So a lot of it is a matter of perspective. But I agree. I agree with what she said, that there's a lot of speculation that's gone into Bitcoin, and that unfortunately has given it a bad name. And that's why you've seen some of these frauds, Sam Bankman-Fried, FTX. Those frauds can occur irrespective of whether it's crypto or non-crypto. I can tell you a case that I was personally involved in, as a victim. MF Global, you can look it up, 2011, where a regulated commodity exchange, there was nefarious activity there, it had nothing to do with crypto. And all of the people that had money there as commodity traders got all their money taken away because of nefarious activity on a regulated, this is all regulated commodity futures, okay? That's part of the psyche and the culture.
It wasn't, it's a speculative asset at best at this point, but I do think that's why I've held mine, and I am up in my crypto portfolio, so.
Are there any questions online? No.
All right, well, we'll wrap up because we're probably a minute after here. So I just want to say something quick. Well, thanks everybody for
Thank
being
you.
here. Thanks to our speakers, students that are tuned in and here that are getting extra credit or something like that. In a second, you should be seeing a slide pop up. You need to complete an exit survey, okay, for today's session. So just some quick answers. Make sure you report your name and the instructor that is giving you credit or whatever the kind of benefit is in there. So there'll be a QR code for that. And just one quick thing, to kind of just learn more about your personal finances and how to really think through a lot of these things. There's an awesome in-depth course that you guys can do called Common Sense Economics. This is online, and there's a practical personal finance badge that you can earn. You can find more information there. Just go to the link or the QR code. And the last slide here, here's the link to today's exit survey. So make sure you fill that out. That way you can get the credit that you deserve. Thanks everybody for tuning in. And we look forward to seeing you next Tuesday as we explore the amazing world of sustainable budgeting. Thanks everybody. Have a great evening.